Welcome to this explainer. You know, as a physics student, you've spent years learning to model reality through a very specific and admittedly incredibly successful lens. But today, we're actually going to challenge the foundational way you've been taught to model time itself. We are looking at a fascinating emerging framework called Relationalism, and we're going to compare it directly to Einsteinian relativity. So, let's dive right in.
This quote from Albert Einstein really perfectly sets our stage. Relativity is absolutely brilliant, but when we zoom all the way down into the quantum realm, where things like gravity might actually be discrete rather than continuous, well, our standard models start to experience some serious friction. So we're exploring a novel mathematical model of reality today that attempts to address this exact friction between continuous general relativity and discrete quantum mechanics.
We've got a lot of dense, exciting theory to cover. Here's our roadmap: the space-time paradigm, introducing Richter relationalism, continuous versus discrete time, separating space and time, the paradox of now, and finally, a new geometric framework. Let's get moving. Section 1. The space-time paradigm. Let's start with your baseline. This is the physics you already know and calculate every single day. In standard relativity, time is an intertwined fourth dimension. It operates on a continuous scale. I mean, think about how you measure time right now. It inherently requires a distortion of space and displacement. You need an observer, you need an inertial frame of reference, and the events themselves are strictly observer-dependent.
Think about the traditional relativistic light cone you're already so familiar with. In this model, relativity focuses entirely on continuous events within space-time. Time is mapped on a real number line as a continuous, unbounded, infinitesimal quantity that extends infinitely into the past and the future. Time can approach zero, sure, but because of how the math works, it can never actually equal zero without leading to some pretty messy singularities.
Section 2. Introducing Richter relationalism.
So, what if we need to model discrete quantum states, where that continuous infinity totally breaks down? Enter Richter, or RT, relationalism. This is a recently proposed alternative framework built specifically for modeling systems where time and space just don't have to be inextricably linked. It mathematically divorces time from space using what's called static symmetry and absolute point time to create discrete event simulations.
When we compare the two directly, the shift is pretty massive. With your standard toolkit, relativity relies on intertwined dimensions and observer frames within a continuum. But relationalism completely flips the script. It relies on separated, independent dimensions and localized, privileged points of reference rather than your standard inertial frames.
Section 3. Continuous versus discrete time.
The absolute crucial point here is understanding how these two theories operationalize time differently. As a physics student, you are entirely used to continuous time, where t never truly equals zero. Everything is calculus-based, and we're dealing with infinitesimals. But relationalism uses discrete steps. It relies on zero-dimensional temporal points where t literally equals zero, and those are bounded by actual physical signals. It essentially maps time on a natural number line with finite durations.
Instead of a light cone moving continuously through space to measure time, relational time is captured as a discrete, whole duration. It's flanked between two object-oriented signals from a privileged point of reference. Time here doesn't require any displacement in space to be measured. It is purely an independent metric of duration.
Section 4. Separating space and time. To actually make this discrete math work, relationalism requires a strict set of rules that fundamentally differ from both Newtonian and Einsteinian mechanics. Because there's no continuous time in this framework, the axioms of RT relationalism just completely discard the tools you're used to. There are zero inertial frames. And here's the real kicker. There are no time derivatives of displacement. That means absolutely no velocity and no acceleration in the foundational model. Instead, it focuses solely on static geometric states of here and now.
So, why does this matter to us? Well, this separation means that anchored spatial and temporal nodes do not need to be mathematically defined at the exact same time. You know that in quantum mechanics, observing a state often forces a wave function collapse. But in relationalism, measuring one boundary state anchors a temporal node completely independently of the spatial geometry. That offers a powerful mathematical way around some massive hurdles in quantum modeling.
Section 5. The paradox of now.
This brings us to a fascinating philosophical and geometric pivot, defining the present. In relativity, now is incredibly tricky. Because time is an infinitesimal continuum, the present is practically an abstract mathematical limit. It's essentially a state of not now. But relationalism anchors discrete spatial and temporal points at an absolute t equals zero. Now becomes a static, firmly anchored reality.
Therefore, while the relativistic present is observer-dependent and bounded by spacetime coordinates, the relational present acts totally differently. Relational time flows through a continuously progressing present that is synchronous or omnipresent at all points of here in the universe. It is entirely independent of relativistic spatial effects.
Section 6, a new geometric framework. Let's look at the underlying geometry.
Relativity relies heavily on the dynamic symmetries of Minkowski space, a 4D continuum that absolutely requires space-time to plot motion. Relationalism, however, applies non-dynamic, finite, and Euclidean geometry. It creates networks of one-dimensional timelines using static, ordered sets. It's essentially treating durations as independent Euclidean 1D metrics.
What you should really take away from this is its utility. This methodology acts as an alternative tool for discrete event simulations. Because it doesn't rely on infinitesimals, it manages to escape the limits of Planck time. It treats a quantum wave function collapse as a literal temporal point element, where t equals 0. And beautifully, it can still harmonize with established spacetime coordinates through localized formulas, converting these relational durations right back into the SI seconds we use every day.
I want to leave you with this really provocative thought from the source material. If we apply this relationalism framework to quantum entanglement, we can conceptualize a state where an entangled particle is fixed at a temporal point of t equals 0 while its spatial location remains completely undefined. If an entangled particle can collapse separately in space and time, yielding independent spatial and temporal points before they even pair in our reality, how does that rewrite the very fabric of physics as we know it? It's a thrilling question to ponder as we continue to push the boundaries of how we model the universe. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the baseline.